if you're live. We're just getting things going. Got some brand new technology we're trying today. And so thanks for being patient. I'm going to try and have your comments loaded. So today I can really see your comments and hopefully see even who's on the stream with us today. So I'm going to pull this up and do it this way. And hopefully be able to see what I need to see. There we go. Hey, it's very meta having a picture of myself right there and right there. And anyway, obviously, because we got the fire in the back, it's one of those days where we're gonna talk. We're gonna have a little bit of talk, a little bit of a chat. One of the reasons I'm going live is I want to know how you're doing. I see Dennis Law. I can actually see people coming in today, and I want to find out how you're doing today. And I have a really special guest that I'm going to bring on. There are a few people in my life when things are topsy-turvy, when I don't really have a handle on what I should be doing or how I should be reacting, which is often, to be honest. I have a very small group of people that, when I say small group of people, like I could count them on this hand and I would have fingers left over that I confide in, I talk to, that I try and get guidance from. They say that you're the sum total of the 5 people that you hang out with the most, and the guy I'm talking with today is someone that either in person or by text message or occasionally by video conferencing, he's one of the people that I get to see or communicate with pretty regularly, so I'd put him in that 5, if you don't count books I read and videos that I see. So because I want to talk about what's going on, if you've seen the video I put up yesterday, I talked about what's happening in our industry because of the coronavirus and really tried to bring something to the table that is very centering. I'm trying to give you some things to focus on that are within the realm of your control, because so much about this is not within the realm of your control. And so if you haven't seen the video that I posted yesterday, feel free to scroll down the timeline here and take a look at that. Or if you go to my YouTube page, it's up there as well. And tomorrow, part 2 is going to come out tomorrow at 10 a.m. And it's already loaded and ready to go. So at 10 a.m. or anytime afterwards, you can see it. So I want to welcome to this live webcast using some brand new technology that I just got put in place like 15 minutes ago. I mean, literally. This is my buddy Charles Gardner. Charles, tell everybody hello.
Hello, everybody.
So we may have audio and video synced. I don't know. If it's not synced, I'm going to do a recorded version of this where we fix that. But because it's new technology, thank you so much for really being what am I looking for? Patient with us. I think that's something, Charles, something we need more of these days. Don't you think? It's one of those things where patience seems to be in short supply with a lot of people.
Yeah, I was sharing with Brian. My wife and I went to the grocery store this morning. Publix is doing that 7 to 8 o'clock for senior adults. And it was one of the sweetest moments was when we pulled up and we saw several of the senior adults in the handicap spaces, and they were loading their groceries in the car. We waited till 8 o'clock. They'd gotten everything loaded up. And, there's that moment where you want to go help them, but, you don't want to be around them and risk infecting them. So you kind of let them load their groceries. And then we went in, but I told Brian that at the end of our grocery shopping experience, we really have been very careful to only buy what we can use for about a week. And we drink a lot of bottled water. And I told Brian, when we were talking earlier, we can debate the virtues of that at a later date, but we drink about a gallon of bottled water a day in our household between coffee and tea and trying to be healthy and drink water instead of all the other stuff we can drink. And Publix had a limit of 2 gallons of any one brand of water. And so I put back the few extra that I had. We generally buy like 5 a week. And this woman just, as we were walking away, she said, "Well, I can see the hoarders are back." And then she confronted me again in the parking lot because of my, too many gallons of water. And so I just smiled at her and wished her a happy day. And I think, I told Brian that I think, most of the people at Publix were fantastic. Everybody was giving and taking. They were being patient with each other. And we certainly need a lot of patience. And I hope that that woman's day got better. I hope that whatever is stressing her out, that it got better throughout the day, because I certainly was reminded that I've got to be patient and be mindful that everyone's got a story and everyone's struggling through this deal. So patience is important.
For sure. That's something that I've definitely seen being out, but I've also seen it in myself. It's being cooped up in the house with my family. My 22, almost 23-year-old son is back in the house right now. And that's a challenge in and of itself. I mean, that even without a crisis, that would be a little bit of a challenge to have your adult son move back in with you. But I know just even with myself, I've seen that I don't really have it nearly as much patience as I should. Just day to day, my inner talk, my self-talk has been very impatient. It has been very short and very unempathetic, unforgiving. Is there something we can do where we get ourselves into a mindset where we're thinking empathetically?
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously we need a lot of empathy in this season, and I think the way that we get ourselves in that mindset is really it's cliche, but it's true. It's really trying to put ourselves in other people's shoes. It's also, as I said just a few minutes ago, it is being mindful that everyone else is going through something. Right. That every single person I passed this morning in Publix. I'm a germaphobe, and so as I was navigating the aisles, man, I was trying to keep 10, 15 feet if I could. I wouldn't go down an aisle that someone else was on. What I know is that there was someone else in the store who was equally concerned, and they maybe were trying to figure out how they were going to pay for the groceries they needed to pay, take care of their family, and or maybe they have someone at home that is medically vulnerable, and they wanted to make sure that they didn't catch anything and take it back home to their family. And so I think the more that we can look in the eyes of other people, and this is one of the things, Brian, I was watching TV last night, and every time someone shook someone else's hand, this piece of me just hurt, because I miss shaking people's hands. I miss hugging people's necks. And so right now, if I can't shake someone's hand, I can't hug someone's neck, maybe I can do more than the courteous look in their eye and really look deep in their soul and try to figure out what's going on. Because everyone that was in that store this morning had a story. Everyone was trying to get something done that was not just buying some snacks for the big game, because there's no big game. It was about being very intentional. And so the more I can remember that, I think the more empathetic that I can be with those other folks who are struggling through the same things we're all struggling through.
You know how I did not set this conversation. There are people that are friends of yours and people that are friends of mine that are friends of yours that know who you are and know what it is that you do. And but there are a lot of people that watch the stuff that I put up that aren't going to know. So I should have preferenced the whole conversation with the fact that you're a pastor.
I am.
And here's the thing, and I say this behind your back as well as in front of the internet. I have a love-hate relationship, not love-hate, but a love conflicted feeling relationship with people in the church, especially clergy. If you knew my story over decades, like a lot of people, there have been people that have let me down, and in big ways, huge ways, and people that in real time they're not necessarily walking the walk. Now, obviously, we're all human. We're all human. Sure. We all have faults and mistakes. Believe me, If we had to rank them, I'd ask if I could walk to the front of the line. But yeah, there's something different. And one of the things that I absolutely love about you, and I've always told people, is as far as Christians go, whether or not you're Christian at all, like as far as the kind of person that you ask people to try and be, in your case, for talking about people who are Christians, you talk a lot about being Christ-like. You're one of the most authentic Christ-like people that I've ever known, because you walk the walk, and it's definitely one of those things where you and I are almost the same age. And or maybe exactly the same age. If we grew up in the same neighborhood, we would be you'd be the kind of person I'd want to hang out with, mainly because I would look at you and go, you know what? He actually studies more than I do. He's actually nicer to people at school than I am. He'll sit at the lunch table with people that I probably wouldn't, because I'd be worried. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you in this conversation with me and with everybody that's here, because as far as being a pastor, even when you weren't the pastor of a church where I was at, you were still a pastor to me. You know,
thank you.
You have always been as close as a text away, and for me that means a whole lot. So I should have prefaced the whole conversation with that, and it's the reason why today, when we were on the phone, I said, "Look, I got this idea. I want to talk, and I want people to be able to. If you're watching the live stream, please, by all means, put a comment in. Let me know how you're doing." I would love to know how you're doing. That's one of the reasons for me to jump on here. I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm not trying to pimp anything, really. I'm just having a discussion with my friend who's a pastor, who's a lot more level-headed than me, and trying to open up a conduit so that we can talk to you guys and see how you're doing through all of this. So tell me this. Is there a way, even if you're not Christian, that you can think pastorally? I mean, if I were to use the word in a sentence like that, would I be wrong for doing that?
No, I mean, I think that, look, most of, obviously I come at this from a Christian perspective. I'm a Christian pastor, but I think that clearly this is a time when we all need to be pastoral toward each other. And as I understand the term, I mean, in the Christian context, that it's sharing the love of Christ with other people. And you're kind in those words. And Brian's always been a text away from me. And I have, I got that same handful of folks, and he's among that same handful from me. And he's always been a text me. And so I think that I think part of that pastoral nature is building genuine relationships and nurturing those relationships over time, such that, when I'm calling you, hopefully it's not just because I need something and I know that it's the same, it's reciprocal. And so I think being pastoral, regardless of our faith, is all about building genuine relationships and nurturing those relationships, which means we're checking in as regularly as we can. We get so busy in this world. We get so many things going on that we forget to do that. And so, I had a buddy that I've known since sixth grade who died a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And had the privilege of speaking at his service. And, he was so good at keeping in touch with people, even before the internet made it a lot more convenient, or technology made it a lot more convenient. He still had that old fashioned book with the numbers in it. And he'd call you and he'd look you up. And then obviously, since technology is allowed, we stay very connected. But I said in his service that, he was very good at, he always wanted a friend, and he was very good at being a friend. And I said, and I think that that's part of what's being pastoral is recognizing people, particularly people who might be on the fringes, who specifically need someone to reach out. But just in general, the people with whom we come into contact, the people who we work with, who we serve with, who we're around in public. I'm a former United Methodist pastor, now an independent pastor, which means throughout my career, I've never had to wear anything on a daily basis that identified me as a pastor. I've never worn a collar. I mean, I'm usually in when I'm not working, I'm in a t-shirt and jeans, or my signature kind of polo shirt and jeans, which I'm grateful for, because when I've shot somebody the bird in traffic, I'd rather they not know that's what I do for a living. And so it's good that I don't have that identity on me all the time. But it also makes me realize, unfortunately, Atlanta and Buckhead are a small town in a big city. And so very few places I can go anymore where someone's not going to recognize me. And it keeps me a little more honest. But I think, again, whether it's our family, whether it's our friends, whether it's, those relationships that are just a degree or two away. Being pastoral means that we build genuine relationships, we genuinely care for them, and we're always trying to figure out how we can be there for them when they need us.
Right. It's one of those things where, because of the business that I'm in, I come in contact with people of all walks of life. I come in contact with a lot of church people because I do a lot of work with churches and people that are in my network that are from churches that I've worked with. But I also work with a lot of people that have never been to a church, don't have any desire to go to a church. Maybe they've been burned at some point. Or people that are completely different in their spiritual beliefs. And, some of that, one of my really good friends that I played a ton of gigs with died this past year that was Muslim. And, that these days can be a little bit of a dirty word to say that you have a friend that's Muslim. But again, for someone that had a spiritual practice, he definitely seemed to be one of the best examples of that spiritual practice. And part of it, it's not always the what's said or what's done. Sometimes when you're just in the room with somebody, there's something about their presence, about their spirit, about who they are that lets you know a lot about them. And it is one of the reasons why you're one of those people I enjoy being in the same room with, because you definitely bring a calming sort of a calming spirit to the room. And so I enter this conversation with a little bit of trepidation, because I know that as I look at the list of people that are coming into the room, the people that are watching, that because we're in the South, at least the ones that are in that list that are in the South, there's a fair amount of those people that do go to church or do have some sort of either current Christian practice or have grown up in the church. But I'm also sensitive to the fact that there are a lot of people that aren't. Because we're such an international town, there's Muslim people, there's Hindu people. I know I've got plenty of friends who are Buddhist or some sort of variant of that. And so, I use a lot of those words with some trepidation, because I realize they come with some baggage. But I really think that at this point in time, that regardless of what your spiritual inclination is, that there's some tenets that are ideal for us to latch on to, whether they're our particular faith or we don't have one. And maybe that's where some of the empathy comes from. I feel like, I know for me, it's not in my nature if I'm being real, it's not in my nature to be all that concerned about other people. And I don't think that I'm all that uncommon, really, because whether it's me thinking about myself over my kids, or me thinking about myself over a person in the grocery store, I think a lot of us have that natural tendency to worry about ourselves first and to make sure that we get ours. And I'm one of those.
Yeah, I think that's natural. I mean, there's part of the human condition is that there's that self-preservation part of who we are, that kind of basic animal instinct. Now, I'll disagree with you in that, at least in my experience of you, that's far from the case. I know how much you love your family and your friends, and you'll bend over backwards to do things for people. And so, but yeah, I think there's that part of that. But we're also, and I've had this debate with several friends recently. In my theology, we're all created in the image and likeness of God. And so ultimately, and then in our faith, and there's this term of original sin, and for your buddies and ours that are on here that are not people of faith, that sin word's loaded too. So I'm careful how I use that. But when I say that, it just basically means that we aren't exactly as God had hoped and created us to be. but we are still created in the image and likeness of God. And so we need to see God in each other. And as you said, I mean, there are a variety of people, a variety of faiths, and we live in a very international city. My little sleepy Atlanta that I was born and raised in is a much different place than it was when I was born. And I'm glad for that. The diversity of our city is what makes us so rich, and I think such a wonderful place to live. And I think it requires us to be even more sensitive to who we are. Hopefully I don't lose credibility with everybody on here. I'm a huge Downton Abbey fan, and so
I won't hold it against you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so, but there's a character named Tom Branson who came to his family as a chauffeur and then married one of the daughters. I mean, for that time in England, that was not, but he becomes this incredibly cool character over time, and he's confronted by a person who doesn't like the British aristocracy and is struggling with the fact that he has embraced this aristocratic family that he was married into. And she says, are you really comfortable with that type? And he says this, he says, I don't believe in types. I believe in people. And so that quote, the first time I saw it, and every time I watch through that episode, I kind of pause it for a second and think about that, is that, yes, I don't think so much about types. I think about people. And here's the reality. And this again is cliche, but it's so true. This virus doesn't care about the color of your skin. It doesn't care where you go to church or don't go to church. If ever there was an opportunity for us to recognize that we're all in this together, we're so connected. It's when you see something like this that it does not discriminate in any shape, way, or form. And it makes us realize that we truly are all in this together and all connected. And I hope that's the lesson we take from this. I hope that there's a lot of lessons we need to learn from this. I hope that's way up on the list of what we learned from this.
Yeah, me too. It's definitely shown us that in life there are great equalizers, and usually they hit us the hardest when we don't expect them to. Regardless of whether you've been watching the news or not watching the news or following what's been going on or not, that's what great equalizers do. They take people from all different walks of life, from all different spans of attention, from all different locales, and immediately say, hey, here's something you can't not pay attention to. And it affects all of us in the exact same way. I've got friends right now that live in the middle of the country that they have very, very different feelings about what's going on than people that live here, or people I know that live in New York, or people I know that live in California. And even within those places, different people feel differently about this. But it's not just in my industry, but across the board, I know some things are true. I know that there are people that are out of work, regardless of whether or not they believe that this is real or should be an area of concern. There are people that are out of work. There are people that either, like me, who everything on their calendar the last 8 weeks has completely dropped off and won't come back. There are people who, for one reason or another, they still have a job, possibly that they'll be able to go back to, but maybe they're not making any money, or maybe they're making less money because of the way this situation has set us up. Just being able to go to the grocery store and get the food that you need, it doesn't really even. I talked to my mother yesterday, and so I asked her, I said, so how's everything going there in Meridian with all this going on? And she said, well, your dad and I, we've been home, and so we really haven't had much contact with anybody else and see what is going on for everybody else. She said, but I did go to the grocery store yesterday and they didn't have any toilet paper. And she said, I only know why because I've seen the news. She said, so it really hasn't affected us yet, but she said I can understand where it would it's possibly gonna hit them at some point, because those are just signposts of things to come. If we look at this as a continuum, right, that there are some people that are further along in the continuum of this and people that are earlier in the continuum. But if you're traveling along the same path, which in this case we don't really have a choice, It's sort of foisted upon us. Then
Right.
then those things, regardless of how you feel about them right this moment, in some way they're going to touch your life. So it is a great equalizer. And I think if anything, hopefully it's giving us an opportunity right now to relook at how we relate to each other and maybe how we allow ourselves to be related to. I know it's really difficult for me to relate to people on. I'm not good at, like, for instance, I'm not very good at small talk. If I know you and we're talking about stuff that we have a common interest in, we could talk all day long. But I'm not one of those people who's really good at picking up the phone and going, "Hey man, how you doing?" "I'm good." "What's going on?" "Not much." I'm not good at that, but it's caused me to rethink that, because there are people that I don't get to see on a regular basis now because we're somewhat sequestered, that I need to pick up the phone, and for no other reason than to do that.
Sure.
What are some of the ways that it's affected you and your family, just the complete tenor of the situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, look, at full transparency, I mean, we finally, the past couple of days, have had a couple moments that weren't pleasant, right? That my son basically hasn't been out of the house in, I guess we're going on 10 or 12 days. My wife really hasn't. She's gone with me to the grocery store a couple of times. I've been the one going out and doing things, but we've really tried to take this seriously. And his school shut down a week ago. It'll be 2 weeks ago on Thursday. So, and her, as well as did her office. And so there was a moment when, and we were trying to fix dinner and something happened and it blew up, and we all screaming and upset. And I kind of had to, we pulled together, and we recognized that part of that was the anxiety of this, that, my wife works for a company that's trying to keep running. He has a school that's fortunate enough that most of their students have the resources necessary to continue learning. So we've tried to keep things as normal as possible, but it's not normal at all. I mean, and I think, there's some good things that'll come out of this. One of the other learning lessons will be that we now realize we have the technology to do some of these things. And so, and maybe this is another segment in a few minutes, but we've seen the canals in Venice, Italy now have dolphin in them that they haven't had in for years. And we've seen places in the world that, because we're staying at home, are seeing a decrease in pollution and an increase in nature. And so maybe part of what we learn from this is if half of us will, if we can rotate some of how we work and how we're on the road and what we're doing, that maybe we can have a positive impact on the environment. But doing it suddenly, without warning, and in a way where I miss people. Brian knows I just love people, and it's cliche. And people, when you're going into ministry, though, why are you going into ministry? I love people. And the process I went through, we had to go through a board of warning ministry. And if you said you just love people, I mean, they would hammer you. But the reality is, I just love people. So for me, I went for a run this morning, and I got out, and I'm being very careful when I do that. I'm staying on the opposite side of the road from other runners, but the joy and the comfort I found when another runner on the other side of the road waved and said good morning and said hello. I mean, it was just like life-giving. And so for our family, we've had, we're fortunate that we have the resources necessary to keep working, keep going to school, keep doing these kind of things with friends like you. But we've had some moments where we're like, this is crazy. And why is this happening? And so, and I think it's important to share that. I mean, I told Brian, I was telling you earlier today, I mean, I feel like one of my responsibilities as a pastor is to stay positive. And what we figured out last night is that part of what caused the blow up was Shannon's job is to keep her team positive and to keep her team going. I feel like one of my responsibilities, my calling, my vocation is that when I get on here with you or in other ways, that I'm projecting something that is hopeful. And so trying not to be, this is just awful, but I also probably need to occasionally answer a question like this, is to say, dude, we blew up at each other last night, because it ain't easy being in the same room with the same three people for going on 2 weeks straight. So I suspect there are a lot of people. And so that patience needs to extend to our family and to what's going on right now in our own homes. And we're probably on the front end of this. We probably got a couple more weeks of this at a minimum, and maybe longer. And so we got to figure it out. So
Pam Sheldon from PRUMC said hello.
Hello, Pam. Thank you.
And I definitely, if your job is to be positive, then I could see where at a certain point there's a release valve that needs to be let out, that needs to be turned.
And that's what we realized. We realized that because we were holding back some of that stuff, right? I mean, we had anxieties. We got, I spoke on Sunday. I did a little live thing, and I said, faith does not remove our fear, but faith gives us a framework in which to manage our anxieties, right? And so I think it's dangerous to say, oh, if you got plenty of faith, then you don't need to worry about this. And that's
the world I grew up in.
I know. We talked about that, right? If you just got enough faith, brother, you're going to be all right. And
pray it out, brother. Pray it out, brother.
Right. And you're going, and again, I'm careful because I don't diminish that either. But I think in these times, that it's so important to recognize, because I think I don't want anybody to feel guilty. I mean, we're going through enough without somebody feeling guilty that they feel anxious, right? If I were a better Christian, then I wouldn't be anxious right now. No, I mean, anxiety is a part of the human condition. Yes, in the Christian faith, we believe in the resurrection. We'll celebrate Easter here in a couple of Sundays, and because of that, we shouldn't have fear. But the reality is that we do, and not to get too deep, but what I realized when I thought about how other people are responding to this is that this is the ultimate existential crisis, because what's really driving fear is that people are dying from this. Right. And what you said earlier is that it's completely beyond our control. There's some things people die from that we've gotten a little bit of control over. And while it upsets us and while it bothers us, we understand it. We don't understand this thing. The people who we generally look to are still trying to figure out. The smartest human beings in this world, epidemiologists and those who doctors and PhDs and all this, they're still trying to get their hands around it. And so it's natural for us to have some anxiety. And so I think the pastoral word in this one is, if you feel that building up, then go outside and scream. I mean, do something, find that release valve. And if you, and if we're going to throw some words out there, forgiveness will be important too, because we're going to do and say things that are out of fear. And so being quick to forgive is always a good idea. Probably more so now than ever when things aren't going exactly the way we hope they would.
Sure. Well, I try and choose my words carefully with people. Oh, Leslie Watkins is on. She says hello.
Hello, Leslie.
I try and choose my words carefully because I grew up in a Pentecostal home. There are a lot of terms that, even though I've been out of that for decades, they're in there. And, they're almost part of my DNA, fortunately or unfortunately. So I try and pick my words well. But one of the things I've tried to do, both for myself and for people that I know, on both sides of the spiritual tennis court, because that's what it seems like sometimes, is that all the mechanisms that exist in any religion or any spiritual practice, all of those mechanisms exist for a reason. And even people that don't have a spiritual practice, or people that don't subscribe to a particular religion, actually hold on to some of those same tenets, but they put them into other forms. So sure. One of the things that I try and really look at is, okay, so prayer. There are people that I know that's the first thing. We joke, pray it out, but there are people that's the first thing that they move to is prayer. And instead of looking at that and thinking, like some folks will think, well, they're just poor folks. They're not strong enough in themselves just to pull it up by their bootstraps and get on with it. They need some other. But you think about all the different ways that, especially in crisis, we try and grab a hold of things that help us to feel as if, number one, we're not alone. That's one of my big things with trying to understand prayer, is that sometimes prayer exists just to help you feel like you're not alone.
Yeah.
There are times when I still pray. But most times when I do pray, I really do feel like the words go out into the air and they just kind of sit in the room with me, like there's nowhere that they can actually go. But I have to also understand that the mechanism is one that, by having someone or something to speak to about the things that concern me, the things that worry me, the things that are beyond my control, whether it's the air or God or another person that understands, the mechanisms in place so that I don't feel alone. And that's one of the things that can happen so quickly in all of this. Even if you have a house full of people, and again, in full transparency, with 3 people in a 3,300 square foot house, it's still possible to feel incredibly alone. It's not just because we're on different floors. We could be sitting in the same room together. And so for me, I've gone back and I've had to look at, all right, so some of the practices and some of the things that exist because of maybe how I've grown up or because of maybe my beliefs, maybe they exist for a reason other than just what I've been told they're for. It's not just pray to God because he'll solve the problem. Maybe there's another reason why we pray to God. Well, one is that so we don't feel like we're alone in the situation. And all of a sudden, now it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot more sense than just speaking words into the ether and hoping that somewhere someone or something is hearing them. So for somebody who doesn't have a spiritual practice, Leslie says that I find that she's praying a lot more these days. Well, she's also a reverend, so that's good to know. That
one of the best.
Yes, and like about everything small or great, and that's one of those where, so there's people ask me, especially because I work in the church, they ask me a lot of times what my spiritual beliefs are. And I have to tell them that it's complicated. It's not complicated like your Facebook status. You read that and you're like, oh, somebody's headed for divorce, right? No, it's complicated in the fact that a lot of the things that I grew up believing and grew up being taught, I don't necessarily believe them the way I did when I was a kid. And a lot of the idea that I have to believe the same way in the same mechanisms along the same lines, that completely takes out the ability for me to grow. And if we're anything, we're supposed to be growth machines. If you're a spiritual person, if you're a Christian, then when you come to Christ the first day, 30 years from then, you shouldn't be in the same place. There should be some kind of maturity there. And so I feel like that should happen in all fronts. And maybe this is a great time to be able to look at that.
Yeah. And so going back to the point, you were going down the spiritual disciplines track and how people do that. And, one of the things that for a long time now, social media has changed the way that we respond and react to these situations. And when something bad happens, for the longest time, we send our thoughts and prayers. And I have a buddy who, understandably cynical about that term, thoughts and prayers. And he had a meme that he would pop up, and I would look at the meme because it basically what it did was to suggest that prayer wasn't important. And it at the same time aggravated and convicted me, because what I realized was that people who do what I do, somewhere along the way, had taken the power out of that word. And the power is what you identified, is that, just like faith doesn't take away our fear, prayer is not, going to a vending machine and saying, this is what I need, and then it comes out the bottom, right? So prayer is exactly what you said it is. and prayer's always been important, but maybe now so more than ever, because we can't be physically together, and prayer transcends that physical presence. And so whether it's prayer or meditation, depending on how people are coming to this, then that's what prayer is for. Prayer is about connecting with God and connecting with each other. And it creates that community. It creates that connection that's above our ability to be physically present with each other. My son, Brian and I know each other's, we know a lot about each other's families, and Brian's been awesome. My son loves a lot of different things, and most recently has really gotten into drumming. In fact, I'm sitting here looking at his drum kit that's just on the other side, and Brian came down and got it all the way it needed to be. And now we're trying to figure out how to build a quiet room around it, because it is really loud.
That'll try your patience.
And my son, I mean, that's one of his releases, and to come down and to drum for 20 or 30 minutes. I mean, it's huge for him. Sure. But he asked an incredibly insightful question for anybody, but particularly just shy of 16-year-old. He said, "Dad, how does this compare to what happened after September 11th, 2001?
Oh, wow.
And I went, wow, because we were talking about that, and I never like comparing things, but how does it compare from I'm losing my words here, but that how did you feel following that versus what we're in the midst of now? And I think the biggest difference so far that I've been able to identify, and I'm doing some writing on this right now, is once we kind of figured out what happened on September 11th, 2001, that next Sunday for people of faith, we were back in church.
Right.
In fact, it wasn't even that next Sunday where I was serving down in Pine Mountain. We had a prayer service, and we gathered physically in the same space. And so the word was, he said, what was more traumatic, September 11th or what we're going through now? And my answer is always different. It's hard to compare those situations, but I don't know that there will ever be anything more traumatic than sitting in watching the TV and watching what was going on that day as thousands of our brothers and sisters lost their lives in it in one moment. But we were able to then physically be in the same spaces with each other. Now for some, there was a momentary lapse in airplanes getting back home and people getting home, but within a reasonable amount of time, families were reunited. We could still get groceries. We could still gather for worship and gather in places where we could be supportive of one another. And so I think that helped us begin to heal. And I think in some ways it's going to take us longer to heal from this because of that physical distance, because we can't be next to each other. And so in the meantime, praying for each other and doing what you said, Brian, being able to call people. I love being physically present with people. I'm not as good. I'm with you. I'm not as good on the phone. And I mean, I want to be with you across the table and having some barbecue and I have to work at that. And so, yeah, it's a long answer to your question, but I think, the prayer aspect, that the spiritual disciplines of that the prayer is not going into the ether. What the prayer is doing is recognizing the connection that already exists among all of us. And as we all do that together, I think it builds a spirit that helps us to navigate times like this. And then I think what we're going to learn too is, that this physical presence piece, because you said it earlier, one of the temptations for pastors is to say too much, which I'm probably doing right now.
No, go ahead.
But the most powerful thing that I've learned in ministry is just the power of presence. There are times when I've gone to visit someone in a hospital where I just simply sit. Or I've been to visit with someone who's struggling and I sit and I listen. And there's such a temptation to jump in and say something because that's, there's got to be some words that can be comfort. And sometimes the only thing or the best thing to bring comfort is just being there. And so, and that's hard for someone who likes, part of my vocation is talking and telling people what I know or what I think I know. So.
What are, talking about staying connected, what are some mechanisms that you've got a brand new church that you
Brand new church, yeah.
And it's a different kind of concept for a church,
right?
That utilizes a lot of outside of the box thinking for how to not only create a church, but how do people relate to each other. What are some technologies that you're using right now that are helping you stay connected and helping the people that are within your purview stay connected?
Me, so far, and obviously you've been so helpful with that, and I know you've helped several churches and congregations navigate this. And that, what's amazing is this technology. I mean, this is an iPhone that was it 12 years ago didn't exist, right? Is that, I mean, it's 12, however long, it's 12 or 13 years old. This thing didn't exist. I got a $20 dongle so that I can, because it's a lightning, so I can plug in my power and my headphone at the same time. So on Sunday, so Brian's been helping us with this, and I've always marveled at Brian's preparation. I mean, he makes things look so easy, but if you've ever, most of you are watching this probably off of Brian's feed, so you know what he does and how he does it. But so we're using the iPhone we were hoping to launch worship Easter Sunday morning. But when all this happened, I had several of the people on my team say, we really would love for you to just, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes on Sunday morning, please begin to get, some kind of message out. And so we really launched the church 2 Sundays ago with an iPhone, and a lot of help from Brian. But this Sunday, we were in a different room in the house, and we'd set up the lights, and Zach hit Facebook Live, and I looked up at the camera and I went, I didn't connect that. We have a Rode wireless microphone that allows the audio to be a little better. And so it was so funny because we got done, and Zach comes in, he grabs a card off my table, off my desk, and he starts jotting something down, and he made a very rudimentary list. And it said iPhone, microphone, lights, and one other thing. I texted it to Brian. I said, and Brian said, that's why that pilots have a checklist, right?
It's a pre-flight checklist. Yeah.
Pre-flight checklist. And so if you're listening to this and we're trying to watch on Sunday, the reason the audio was so bad was because I forgot the microphone and we were using, but even with that, one of the things I've had to learn is that something doesn't have to be perfect to be effective. And so if I'm learning anything else, right, that it's an evolution. So just like Brian said, and I'm glad I'm going to finish that thought, but I knew I'd forgotten something. You were talking about how we evolve in our faith. And in the Wesleyan tradition, it's called moving toward perfection. That one of the things that John and Charles Wesley, who founded the Methodist movement, believed was that part of grace is this process of sanctification. And it's where we are perfected in God's love. And that happens. And we believe that can happen in this lifetime, but it is that evolution. It's loving as God loves us. And so loving each other as God loves us. And if there's one thing that's going to get us through that, it's going to be loving each other as God loves us. And so, I'm glad that triggered that. But so we're going to use that. Brian's helping me right now to figure out some ways where we can, beyond the iPhone and Facebook Live, do some things that allow me to do this in a way that it is done with a level of excellence that allows people to engage in a meaningful way. But what it's learning, is one of the guiding principles of our new church is agility. And you said it earlier, this ability to be agile. And so I'm already realizing that I knew all along intuitively that this wasn't going to replace physical presence. I knew that. I knew that part of being a Christian community is that you have to be in the physical space. I mean, celebrating the sacraments, baptism and communion, those things that we celebrate in our tradition need to be physically present. So now what I'm thinking about is how does this technology augment what we're doing? How does it facilitate physical meetings? And so one of the things we've talked about is pop-up church. And so how do we utilize the technology to tell everybody, hey, this Sunday morning, we're going to be at the Beltline at 8:00. And if you want to swing by, we're going to have a short message. And, if you're walking by, getting your exercise in, whatever. And so how do we leverage, whether it's text messaging, whether it's going out on Facebook. But also also during the week, if people can't get in a physical location, a lot of churches are being very effective in using Zoom and other technology platforms to gather 10, 15, 20 people. It's not going to replace being in the same spot, but I think what it's going to help us do is really get good at using this technology in ways that enhances that physical presence.
Well, look, I appreciate you taking the time to sit and talk with me, and it definitely helps me feel better about what's going on. I know there's a lot of people out there that are really, really worried.
Yep.
That feel very uncertain about what's going on and what happens next. Is there some kind of advice you can offer somebody, not just me, but anybody, any of our friends that are watching this? What is it that because there's so much that's outside of our control, what is it that they can focus on that will keep them centered and grounded and sane through all of this?
And you said it, Brian, and you said it several times. And I got to say this, I this will be a mutual admiration time, but I learned so much from Brian. Brian is so thoughtful in the way he approaches what he does, and he puts every ounce of energy in, whether it's mixing music or playing the drums or producing video. So I learned so much from the way he goes about his business and goes about how he treats the people with whom he's working. And so it really is a situation about control, right? And I think that the way, and people are worried, and that's natural. I think that there's just thinking off the cuff, there's a couple, 3 ways that we're gonna get through this. One is to recognize that we will get through this. As we look at other parts of the world where the virus has been and is beginning to subside, there will be another side of this. The extent to which we do what we need to do will determine how long it lasts, but we will get on the other side of this. And so controlling what we can control. And I think that's one of my dear friends, and Brian and I both know Ron Greer, who's a pastor, a friend, a counselor. Brian says I bring calm, and he and I have talked about it. I have a terrible temper. I've had to spend the better part of 49 years learning how to control that temper, right? And so one time Ron was talking to me, he said, anytime someone is sticking it in you and you're ready to just blow up at them, think respond, don't react. Okay. Respond, don't react, right? Okay. So a response requires a moment of thought that can radically change the way we treat the other person or treat the situation. If we react, then 9 times out of 10 is probably not going to be a good thing. So I think that understanding that we're going to be on the other side of this, and throughout this process, responding rather than reacting to the situation. And then I think we've already talked about it, staying connected in the ways that we can. So phone calls, video chats, Skypes, FaceTime. I started one of the women who is on our team. The discipline that she did was that she has been going through her contact list on her phone, and she's just, I don't know where she is in it. She may have gotten all the way through it already, but from the day one, the first thing she prioritized it. So she went through her contact list, and anybody who was an older adult who she thought might be vulnerable, who might need help, she went through and contacted them first. And then she's just going through and contacting people just to say hi, just to check in. And so it's a good way to clean out your contacts and see who's in there. But just that discipline of going through there. And I've had a couple people that are clearly doing the same thing. And it meant so much to me to get a quick text message. I'm thinking about you. How are y'all doing? And so, and then one final thought I think is that when we do emerge from this, there's going to be a lot of debriefing and really kind of trying to figure out what happened, why it happened, and what we can improve. I hope it resets some of our priorities. I hope it resets some of how we spend our time. I hope it resets some of those things. And I say that for this reason, that we need the people who are going to struggle from this. There are going to be people who lose their lives from this. It will have been in vain if we don't learn from it. If we don't change the things that we can change to make this world a better place. And so that's part of my commitment, is that I'm going to figure out how to have these conversations in which we learn how we need to reset our priorities, and make more time for each other, and be more kind to each other, and be good neighbors, and learn to love each other as God loves us. And so I appreciate you pulling this together and giving me opportunity to jump on with you. I always love spending time with you, and I'm always better for it. So thank you. And your technical wizardry is always amazing to me. So,
well, and when we're done with this, I'll go back and I'll figure out how we can make it even better the next time. Yeah, that's
awesome.
That's one of the things that I'm focusing on through all of this, is that part of what I do. How can I leverage the technology that sits around my house to be able to better do whatever it is that I need to do at the time. So, thank you. I feel a lot better having talked to you. And I hope that our friends that are watching or listening, whether it's been live or it's after the fact, because this will be up forever now, I hope that they get...
For better or for worse.
Yeah, for better or for worse. I hope that they get some kind of encouragement and some kind of solace, and more than anything, just a centering, to let them know that regardless of what's external that we don't really have any control over, or we're not fully informed about, we can be fully informed about ourselves, about those that are immediately around us, and we can be informed on how to best find the best version of ourselves in every situation that happens going forward. My hope is that the cultural shift that we see, or the global shift that we see, and this is ideal and hopeful, is that that this puts us in a place to where we see every situation first from a position we've never had to. We have to see the situation that's in front of us, whether it's favorable or unfavorable, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. We always look at that situation as, I don't really know if what's happening right now is a good thing or a bad thing. I just know it's a thing. And I don't know how this is going to turn out past the second that I'm experiencing right now. But what I do know is that I can choose to, like you said, respond rather than react to the situation, and think for one moment, if whatever I'm experiencing involves another person, whatever my feelings are right now, to some degree, that person has those exact same kind of feelings. Yep. They may exhibit, they may come out in a different way, but the root of the feeling is the same. So we really do feel the same. We're coming from the same place, even though it may look completely different to my eyes, or the way that I react may look completely different to your eyes. But the feeling is the same, and the outcome that hopefully we all want is the same. We just want people to be okay, and to be able to move into the next minute, to move into the next hour, to move into the next day, and be able to move forward in a progression where things continually get better for them. So that's my hope, is that we completely see every situation, whether it's that altercation at the grocery store, or customer service on the telephone, or our kids. I'm having to rethink how I respond to my kid in a moment of conflict, because 22 years old, and a lot like his dad, there's a whole lot of conflict. so anyway, thank you so much for this. If you got something out of this, I really hope that you will share this, and please comment if you're watching this after the fact. please leave a comment at the bottom of this. Let me know how you're doing. Charles he's tagged on here, so he'll see it too. Let us know how you're doing. If there's anything that you need, I know that I'm as close as a DM or a text or a phone call away. And thanks to technology, so is Charles. If you don't have a pastor, no matter what your faith is, if you just need someone who is centered, then I'm sure Charles wouldn't mind you reaching out to him.
Absolutely not.
And if you feel like you're alone, please don't feel that way. The quickest way for you to not feel alone is to reach out. So I would encourage you to go back and look at the video that I posted yesterday, especially if you're in the music industry, but it can apply to anyone, about the what's happening with us in the coronavirus. I'll have another video tomorrow for anyone who's been displaced with anybody that's been displaced with work and income. I've got some ideas for you tomorrow that I'll share with you that hopefully will get your wheels turning. Some of them will be directly actionable. Others will give you the ability to brainstorm and figure something out to do. And then Friday, I'll have a third video for you. And I may do something live on Thursday as well. So, Charles, thank you for hanging out with me.
Thank you, Brian. Always great to be with you.
Thanks to everybody on the other side of the camera, everybody that I'm looking at online that have left comments or that have popped into the room. Thank you so much. And I guess I'll see you when I see you.